Welcome to the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast, formerly known as Chapters of Motherhood. I'm your host, Veronica Moss, and I've returned with an evolved vision. I'm currently in studio passionately crafting brand new episodes set to officially debut in the spring of 2024. We now focus on promoting spiritual growth in all areas of life, including career, relationships, and mindful parenting. While you're waiting for the new season to kick off, why not revisit some of the classics? We've got your favorite episodes from Chapters of Motherhood lined up for your enjoyment. So sit back, relax, and let the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast lead you on a journey of self-discovery and growth. Stay tuned. Welcome to your renewed spiritual sanctuary, the Spiritual Lifestyle Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to Chapters of Motherhood Podcast. I am your host, Veronica. If you've been listening from the beginning, welcome back, and thank you so much for your support. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I hope that you find this content relatable and useful. My show is a storytelling format, not an expert advice format, because parenting really is a learn as you go, and every child is different, so your parenting style has to adapt to each child. So I'm not giving you advice, I'm sharing my motherhood stories. So with that said, this is episode 9, baby training. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about baby training, as in sleep training, self-soothing, and potty training. So starting with sleep training, I know that sleep training has a negative connotation to it, but the reality is that you're simply teaching your baby how to fall asleep on his own or her own. It's not about sleeping through the night, because we're talking about, infants that still wake up in the middle of the night for feedings, like maybe once, twice, 3 times a night. So this is solely for training your baby on how to fall asleep on his own or her own. So with that said, sleep training usually occurs somewhere between 4 and 6 months. Now, because I have 5 children, I have 5 different experiences, and not one sleep method worked twice. There are basically 5 common sleep training methods. One is called the faded out sleep training method, which is a very gentle, no tears, no cry, very little crying method of, coaching your baby to fall asleep. So, for example, you could be like rocking the baby or the hush pat or feed to sleep. And basically what you do is you just start reducing the amount of time that you do it. So if you're rocking for like 20 minutes, you start cutting it down to 15, you start cutting it down to 10, you start cutting it down and putting the baby to sleep once he's groggy. Then there's the pick up, put down training method, which is, exactly what it sounds like. You put your baby down in the crib or bassinet, and when the baby starts fussing, you pick him up and you pat, and you put him back down. And if he starts fussing again, you pick him up and then you calm him down, put him back down. So it's exactly what it sounds like. So eventually the baby will calm down and go to sleep. However, that doesn't work for a lot of babies because they get agitated more that they're being picked up and put down. It works for some, it doesn't work for all. Then there's the chair sleep training method, and this one, it works, but there's a little bit more tears because basically you're putting a chair near their crib or bed, and you're just sitting there waiting for them to fall asleep. And some will do and say nothing, and some would suggest that you tell them, I'm here, I love you, you're safe, don't worry about it, I'm right here with you. So eventually every night you start moving the chair further and further away. And so that one's pretty simple because eventually they do fall asleep and you do move the chair further and further away. Then there's the Ferber method. Basically, the Ferber method is you check and console method. What you do is you put your groggy baby down in her crib, and when she starts fussing or crying, you just let that happen. And you do a time limit on it. Like you do like 1 minute. Then you go and you check and you tell the baby, I'm here, it's okay. Or you pat them or something. And then you leave and then let her fuss and cry for 2 minutes. And then you go and check and then let her fuss and cry again for 4 minutes and then 8 minutes. Like maximum is 10 minutes before going in and checking. And you're just reassuring them, you're consoling the baby. You don't want to pick up the baby. You want to keep the baby in the crib and, give them the passies or turn on their mobiles or whatever it is. But you're consoling them, but you're not picking them up and you're leaving. And every night it gets less and less. And so the goal is that the baby is learning how to fall asleep on his or her own. And the last method is the cry it out method. And this one is the one that, people have a negative connotation to, because it's basically exactly what it sounds like. You put your baby down wide awake and you just let them cry it out. And the goal is for them to just, learn to be by themselves on their own, fall asleep. And the experts on the cry it out method will say you don't go in and console them. You don't put anything on for them. You don't go and check. You don't, even if they've fallen asleep, you shut the door. You don't open the door until the next morning. And this obviously is not good for a baby that is still feeding during the night. But I have heard stories on experts saying even if your baby has thrown up, you don't go in there. Which this is, I'm just going to say it. Don't do this. This is not a good one because you do need to check your baby. You got to make sure the baby is okay. But that's the cry it out method. There are some other experts that they do say, once they have quieted down and fallen asleep, you do go in and check on them. Which, if you're going to do it, at least do it that way. Once they've, calmed down and fallen asleep, go check with them. But, there's no learning. You just put them in the crib, walk away, let them cry. But the most important part of sleep training is routine. You have to have a bedtime routine. Once you get a routine going, baby learns that this is what happens before I go to sleep. So that's the most important part. And bedtime routine can be whatever you want it to be. A lot of people, including myself, will do a bedtime routine of bath time, potty, brush your teeth, go to bed. That's a routine. Or some people will do, brush your teeth, change into your jammies, read a story. That's routine. So whatever you decide your bedtime routine would be, just make sure that you start that every night. It has to be a routine for the baby to understand that it's bedtime. So with all that out of the way, I want to start with my firstborn, with Adam. This is what I did for him when he needed to be sleep trained. He was actually pretty easy. It was the old school method, and I guess it turns out to be the faded out method. But for him, what I would do is I would rock him and pat and hush. You know what I mean? So I would give him his bottle first. Well, okay, let me start. I would do his routine first, make sure he had a clean diaper and give him his feeding. And then I would put him over my shoulder to burp him. And once he would burp, I would keep him on my shoulder and I would rock and pat and shh, 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 whenever he would start to cry. And then I would put him down. And so because I did that from the very beginning, he was very easily sleep trained. That's all it took. When he was tired, I would put him on my shoulder and I would pat him and he would fall asleep. Once he kind of started growing out of that, somewhere around 9 months or so, I would just put him down on his crib. I forgot. He really enjoyed the crib mobile, the little mobile with the little things that hang down and has that Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star song. So I would turn that on and pat and hush and rock. And like I said, once he outgrew that, I started putting him straight into his crib. And depending on what he wanted, sometimes he wanted to be on his belly, so I would pat him on his back and do the same thing. Or he would turn over and I would be rubbing his chest and doing pretty much the same thing. Shh, 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 and that would be it. And it was easy for him. Once he outgrew that, or not exactly outgrew it, but he evolved to self-soothing, and his self-soothing involved himself rocking himself and sometimes head banging, which at first I thought it was a concern, but it turns out that babies do that sometimes. They do a little bit of head banging on the mattress, And that's a self-soothing method for babies because I don't really understand it, but it's not hard. It's not harmful. They're pretty much rocking themselves that way. Now, during the day for nap times, after 6 months, I relied more on either car rides or on the swing. He needed to be in motion. But about 1.5 years old, he kind of had a sleep regression. And I think that's because we had moved and it was the summertime. So it was getting later, or that is, it wasn't getting dark until about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And because of that, he noticed that, hey, it's daylight, it's not dark. And so we kind of had a bit of a sleep regression. So I had to try a different method. And so at that point, I thought I was doing the cry it out method, but it turns out it was the Ferber method because I didn't just leave him in his room crying. We would put him in his bed and we would shut the door and he would start crying. He would get up and we'd get up and put him back in bed and tell him everything's okay. It's still bedtime. And we would walk out and he would cry and we would go back in. It's still okay. It's bedtime. So that took about 3 nights. But I mean, he was like really wailing during that time. He was crying really hard. And that took about 3 nights for him to finally get over it and realize, like, bedtime is bedtime when the routine has started. And so that was Adam's experience. Now, Leah was a little difficult because she was a colicky baby for the first 3 months. Not that I was trying to sleep train her before 4 months. It was just that she was colicky for the first 3 months. And I had stopped breastfeeding her right around like 3.5 months. So once that happened, I started bottle feeding her. So it was a perfect time, with so much changes, it was a perfect time to start doing the sleep training. So what I did was the pat and hush as well, and I rocked her. But with her, it didn't work on its own, so I had to figure out a different way. So I would rock her in my arms and also throw the blanket or receiving blanket over my shoulder and over her. You know what I mean? I didn't put her on my shoulder. I would hold her in my arms and put the blanket over me and her. And for some reason, I guess she really liked that because it reminded her of breastfeeding. She liked that. I don't know. I call that the canary method because, I'm covering her up so she really can't see anything. And it soothed her. It calmed her. She also had her own soothing method, which was she used to suck her fingers. And that was something I could never break her from. She sucked her fingers until I think she was like 4 years old, maybe. But anyway, before doing all that, I would turn on the mobile. She really enjoyed the mobile as well. So she liked the music from the mobile, and I would rock her while I had the blanket over us. And when she would fall asleep, she was out, so I would put her down. So that worked. And then after she was a year old, it was just the bedtime routine, bath, toothbrush, story, and then we would turn on the mobile and the nightlight, and she would cry and self-soothe. And she didn't cry much at bedtime because she would self-soothe with her, sucking on her fingers. And plus, her and Adam shared the room. So they would, talk and giggle and play. They would stay in their beds. And naps were pretty easy because she did self-soothe. She would just fall asleep wherever she was. Like when she was tired, she would go lay down wherever she was and, suck on her fingers and fall asleep. So nap times weren't a problem with her. Next is Sophia. And Sophia, everything has been easy with her. Everything has been easy with Sophia. I didn't even try to sleep train her until she was about 6 months. And that's only because I had stopped breastfeeding at 6 months. And so she needed a different routine. So prior to 6 months, from 0 to 6 months, she would breastfeed. I would burp her. I'd change her diaper. I could do whatever I needed to do and put her down with her sounds. Like she used to listen to the white noise sound, which is like the ocean waves or rain. Plus her mobile. She also really liked the mobile as well. But after 6 months, I needed to come up with a different sleep method. So I started with the bedtime routines. Usually it was a feed first, a bath, then the crib with the mobile, And I would give her her pacifier because she actually really liked her pacifier a lot. She self-soothed with it. So I would give her a pacifier, turn on her white noise and her mobile. I would tell her I love you, good night. And I made sure to say good night. She needed to know that the word was good night for sleep time. And I would walk out and, it's the Ferber method, which is check and console. So that's what I did. I would walk out, she would start fussing a bit, and I would go in, tell her I love you, good night, give her her pacifier again, make sure her white noise and her mobile were on, and walk out. And then a minute later or 2 minutes later, same thing. So I did that the first night. I think I did that like 10 times the first night. And then the second night was only like 5 times. And she never would get to an actual cry because I would go in there before she would actually start like really crying. And I made sure not to pick her up. I just made sure that, she was okay. And I would like pat her and tell her, I love you, good night, and kept giving her a pacifier and walking out. So by the third night, I think she only did it twice. She only like fussed or cried twice. And that was it. Like from that night on, or the fourth night on, she knew good night meant good night. And she would go to sleep. And it was super easy. And she did really well with it because, like I said, she didn't actually start crying. She'd start fussing and, a little bit of crying, but not like full on crying. So then I started doing that during nap time as well. She would take actually 3 naps during the day and then sleep through the night. But during nap time, as soon as I would notice her like yawn or rub her eyes a bit, I would do the exact same thing. I'd pick her up. I would take her to the crib, turn on the mobile and the white noise, give her her pacifier and say goodnight. And she was good with that. But she was very dependent on the pacifier. So if she would wake up in the middle of the night and didn't have it, she would fuss and cry, and we would just go give it to her and turn on the music again, and she was good. So that was kind of the downfall, because if she didn't have her pacifier, she would wake up and she would cry. And she really depended on it until about 2.5 years old, when I made her give it up. Now, next is Emily. And no method worked for Emily. None. Not one. None worked for Emily because she was a high needs baby. And I tried them all. Nap time never existed for her. The only time that she would nap was during breastfeeding, that is. But I mean, she had to be on the breast. If I tried to remove the breast from her, she would wake up, she would start crying, and I would have to put it back in. So yeah, she was very difficult. So no sleep method worked for her. Not the rocking, not the padding, not anything. And I'm talking about like her first 12 months. No sleep training method worked. The only thing that would work, like I said, was breastfeeding her. And the way that I would have to do it at nighttime, I would be in the rocking chair, I would be feeding her, and, as soon as she'd fall asleep, I'd try to lay her down, but then she would wake up. Now, I couldn't even burp her. I couldn't even put her over my shoulder and burp her because she would wake up and she would start screaming again. So I would have to put her on the breast again. And yeah, I know that that's not good, to not burp her, but she would wake up crying because I woke her up. So the only way that it would work is as soon as I got that, like she would sigh like that, I knew I needed to get her off and transfer her straight to the crib, because if I waited even 2 minutes too long, she would wake up. So as soon as I got that sigh from her, I would immediately put her down. Before that sigh, I would have to put her down 3 to 5 times a night and pick her back up because she would wake up. And when I tried the Ferber method of, letting her cry for a little bit and then picking her up, that was a mistake, because she would get more amped up. She would cry harder and harder, and she would start flailing in her crib, and she would end up hitting herself on the crib, on the crib. And so I couldn't do that, and there's no way I was going to cry it out, because she, like I said, she would cry, it would get worse and worse. So eventually I had no choice but to co-sleep with her. And when she would wake up in the middle of the night for feedings, there was no way I could change her diaper. no way, because she would like be screaming furiously. If I tried to change her diaper before feeding her, she would be screaming, screaming, screaming. There was, I would have to really work at trying to console her and get her to calm down. If I tried to change her diaper after she fell asleep, she would wake up. So unfortunately with her, there was just no changing her diaper in the middle of the night, even if she woke up completely wet, even if she had poop. I couldn't take the risk of having her wake up or having her scream and cry more than usual, more than what a normal baby would cry. So if I wanted her to nap, I would have to baby wear her. And I baby wore her a lot, like a lot. I would baby wear her. And when I mean let her nap, I mean I would have to just baby wear her for an hour and walk and, do chores or dishes or eat. Like I would have to baby wear her so that she could sleep. And if I didn't want to be breastfeeding her the whole time. And so that is what would happen. I could not transfer her from the carrier to her crib or to a couch, or like I couldn't transfer her. So once I finally gave up and started just co-sleeping with her, then that made things a lot easier. So I would just lay down with her, and as soon as she would fall asleep, I would unlatch and walk off. Sometimes if she didn't wake up. If I got that sigh, then I could do it. So I breastfed Emily up until 24 months. But by that time, I was already 8 months pregnant with Grace. And I had, at 8 months, I had developed breastfeeding aversion. And I didn't even know that there was a name for it, and I found out later. But breastfeeding aversion, very quickly, it's feelings of anger and irritability while breastfeeding the child and wanting the feedings to end. It makes your skin crawl, you're angry, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're irritated, and you just want the baby off. Or I just wanted the baby off of me already, because I was already 8 months pregnant. She was kicking and clawing at me and, pretty aggressively, like pulling up my shirt whenever she wanted to. And so right after she turned 2, I'm talking about like 2 and 2 days. You know what I mean? I just had enough. I was like, it had gotten to the point where I was just so, full of rage that she was on me. I mean, I never did anything to her, obviously, but it bothered me so much that I was feeling that way while breastfeeding her. And later I found out that there was an actual name for it, breastfeeding aversion. Well, anyway, that's when I decided I needed to cold turkey her. I just was not going to breastfeed anymore. I had gone away on my baby moon, and it was the perfect time to just stop breastfeeding her. So when I came back, I knew I had to have a different sleep method. And I needed her to start sleeping in her toddler bed because, like I said, I was 8 months pregnant. This new baby was coming soon, and I needed her to be independent out of my bed and in her own toddler bed, and no more breastfeeding to sleep. So when I came back from, our trip, I decided that, I would tell her, we're going to cuddle. We're not going to feed. We're going to cuddle. And I would actually sleep in her toddler bed, 8 months pregnant in this tiny little toddler bed, which the mattress is a crib-sized mattress. And I would climb in there with her and we would cuddle. And that worked, actually. It took a while, but, it did work. So we would cuddle, and then she would fall asleep. And then I thought, well, this is good, but it's not good enough, because as soon as the baby's born, I can't cuddle with her anymore. But that was just what I had to do. So once the baby was born, I told Emily, lay in your toddler bed. I'm going to be sitting in the chair. This is where the chair method actually came into place for me. So I told her to stay in her toddler bed, and I was, feeding the baby in the chair, which the chair was right next to her bed. And so I would breastfeed the baby while I was rocking and breastfeeding the baby to sleep. She would sometimes fall asleep before the baby, sometimes she didn't. So if she had fallen asleep and the baby, or she hadn't fallen asleep and the baby was asleep, I would put the baby down in her crib and continue to sit in the chair until she would fall asleep. And that was actually pretty difficult because she depended on me to rock in the chair and wait for her to fall asleep. And she would sometimes stare at me and I would stare back at her from the chair. So I would tell her, stop looking at me, look ahead, fall asleep. So I had to do that for about a year and a half. And that's finally what worked. I mean, it worked to help her fall asleep in her own bed, but it didn't really work out for me because it took a whole year and a half. And the only reason why it took a year and a half is in the next story with Grace. Now, because Emily was such high needs, it was very difficult to sleep train Grace. Not because of Grace, but because Emily would purposely wake her up and shake her and, talk loud when she knew that she was trying to fall asleep. Now, this is only during nap times because bedtime, we figured it out. I had to breastfeed her to sleep and put her down, and then that would work out. But I'm talking about nap times. Nap times, Emily would make sure to wake her up. So because of that, I had to do a lot of baby wearing of Grace as well in order to protect her from Emily, which is really hard because she had so many items that could have helped her out. I could have put her in her bassinet. I could have put her in her soothing chair. I could have put her in the pack and play, had a upper level where, for newborns that you could put them in the upper level to sleep if you don't want them in the bassinet. But I couldn't do that because Emily would go and shake it, or she would go make noise in the crib or in the room, that is, and make noise and wake her up. Or she would try to hang on to the soothing chair, and so that would wake her up. So if I wanted her to sleep, I would have to baby carry her to make sure that Emily didn't wake her up. So again, for bedtime, for Grace, I would feed to sleep and the chair method for Emily. But because they shared the same room, I couldn't do any other type of sleep training for Grace. Otherwise, it would interrupt Emily and it would wake her up. So I really had to sacrifice good sleeping habits for Grace in order to get Emily comfortable. And I'm paying the consequences now because of it, because they both developed bad sleep habits. And this is how. So I breastfed Grace for 13 months, and on her 13th month, she self-weaned, and she decided that she didn't want to breastfeed anymore. So I had to come up with a different sleep method. So what I tried was rocking her in the chair and continued the same chair method with Emily. And so that worked for about another 6 months until it didn't work anymore. So after that, I decided that I was going to turn on the YouTube lullabies for babies, like nighttime lullabies, and I put them both on their beds, and they would listen and watch the little baby lullaby videos for about an hour, and then they would fall asleep. And that worked for all of us because I was finally not spending 2 to 3 hours trying to get these girls to sleep. They would, get sleepy and tired just watching the lullaby videos. And that's it. That's what I did. That's what they're doing to this day. They develop very bad sleep habits. They cannot fall asleep on their own, and they need something to watch while going to sleep. Now, I don't think I would have had that much of a difficult time with Grace had they not been sharing a room and had Emily not been so high needs, because I needed to really plan everything around Emily. So those were the sleep training methods that I had tried. Moving on, now to potty training. I know that there are a couple of different methods, but honestly, they all pretty much have the same basic cores, which is, praise and positive reinforcement, training diapers versus training underwear, bottomless, or training time versus age. So, but in the end, it all leads to the child learning to pee and poop in the toilet. The only one that I see that it's pretty different is the infant training or the elimination training. And that's basically done before the baby is a year old, so from 0 to 12 months. And that's actually how my mom, that's old school. That is as old as time, as old as women have been having babies, the elimination method. And that's what my mom did with us. What it is that, babies have cues, just like with breastfeeding, just like with tiredness. They have cues that lets you know when they're ready to eliminate. And Basically, what you do is you keep the child bottomless or like wearing a gown. And when they give those cues, you're ready to rush them to the toilet or, the pot and let them eliminate like that. And my mom says that she did that with all three of us, myself and my brothers, because she was a stay-at-home mom. So she was able to do that. And we were all potty trained by the time we were 1 year old. So she says that, that's what they did in her little pueblo. And so that's how she learned. That's how she taught her brothers and sisters. And so when she had us, that's what she did with us. And so that one's like really interesting. I didn't do that like on purpose. I didn't do that. I did it a couple of times with Sophia. But that one's a really interesting one. And like I said, that's old as time. That's been from the beginning of women having children. And I don't know, it got lost in modern society. It got lost in diapering. It got lost. So with that one being the only different, like real different one, the rest are pretty much the same. It just, like I said, it's just, time versus age, potty chair versus seat insert for the toilet, underwear or bottomless, or, pull-ups, things like that. So here's my experience with Adam. Honestly, with Adam, I didn't even think of potty training him. Because, I don't even know why. I just didn't even think of potty training him. And he was 3 years old. I think he was a little bit older than 3, almost 3.5. And my mom mentioned it, like, when are you going to start potty training him? I'm like, what? Potty training? And to me, it just seemed like, I don't know. I don't know if I was overwhelmed by it. I don't know if I just didn't want to think about it. I don't know what I was thinking, but when she mentioned it, I thought, okay, well, I guess I should start trying to potty train him. He is, older than 3, a little bit older than 3. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And he was surprisingly extremely easy. Because he already could communicate with me. I had just told him, hey, Adam, I'm running out of diapers for you. So we're going to have to learn to potty train, and I'm not going to have any more diapers for you. Okay. And he looked at me and he understood. He goes, no more diapers? And I said, no more diapers. And he said, okay. And so when he ran out of his diapers, I got him some, training underwear, and I had gotten him a potty chair, and I started teaching him to potty in the chair. And he got it immediately. As soon as there was no more diapers, he immediately got it. And I was taking him every 2 hours to the potty. And every time I needed to go, I would sit down and he would sit down, and we would both go together. And he got it. It took me 2 days to potty train him. He had, the very first night, he had an accident. And that was the one time. That was it. The next day, he got it again, and that was it. Like, he understood, super easy, couldn't believe how easy that was. So because it was so easy, I thought that, Leah would be even easier, because they say that girls are easier. Wrong. She was difficult. She refused. She refused to learn. I started trying to teach her at 2.5, but I don't know. I think she was just scared to pee. Like, I think she was scared of the free flow, of nothing catching it. So she was scared of it. She was scared of the toilet. She was scared of the potty. She was scared of not having any diaper on. She didn't even want underwear. Like, she was scared of it. So at 2.5, I thought, okay, well, she's not ready. So I stopped. And then I tried again around 3. At that time, I tried again. And again, she was scared. She was scared of the potty. She was scared of the toilet. She was scared of not having the diaper to catch it. She was scared of the free flow. And we had a lot of accidents. We did. We had a lot of accidents. It took like 2 weeks. And I really needed the help of my babysitter, So I told her, hey, I'm trying to potty train her, and, she's having accidents. She's just not getting it. She doesn't want it. So the babysitter helped out a lot. And because she was potty training Leah, her own son started to learn to potty train as well. And he caught on faster than Leah. So because he was a year younger than Leah, I don't know if she felt like it was competition or what, but she saw that the boy had done it and he learned how to do it. So then she started doing it. And so she did finally learn, but it took her 2 weeks and a lot of accidents. Now, like I mentioned with Sophia, it was quite by accident that I held her over the toilet as she pooped. And it was just a few times. It happened to be a couple of times when she was in the bath and I saw her face and I was like, oh no. And I pulled her out and I put her over the toilet a couple of times and sure enough, she pooped. And then a couple of times when it was in the middle of a diaper change where she started to push, I'm like, oh no. And I would go take her to the toilet and she would poop in the toilet. And quite by accident, I wasn't trying to train her like that. I wasn't, it was just a quite by accident. And like I said, this was, about a year and under. But around 20 months old, she began to show readiness. And because my mom was babysitting, she started training her on a toilet seat insert. And as soon as she would wake up, she would take her straight to the potty and have her pee. And then she just started saying, oh, she's really catching on, so I'm going to potty train her for you. I'm like, okay, that sounds great to me. And yeah, my mom potty trained her. And I mean, obviously, when I would get home from work, I would, take over. And so she learned to be potty trained, still wearing a diaper or a pull-up, that is. Like, she didn't even have underwear. So she learned pretty quickly, even though she had the diaper or pull-up. I would say, like I said, my mom did most of it. So I would say that it didn't take her too long, like a couple of days. So she was definitely potty trained before she even turned 2 years old. But after her second birthday, her dad and I, we broke up. We, went through something and we broke up. And that disruption in her life caused her to regress. And she started wetting herself and she just stopped pottying. She started wetting herself. She started pooping herself. We had to get the diapers again. And I knew it was, it was her own stress, knowing that, daddy wasn't there anymore. And so I didn't try to potty train her again until she was about 2.5 years old. And it took about 2 weeks because she was still being shuffled between me and him. And, it was stressful. Like, the babies, they understand. Like, they know. They know something's different. They know something's wrong. And it was stress on her. And it took her 2 weeks to relearn how to potty train, but mostly because she was under stress and she was shuffling back and forth between me and her dad. Now, as for Emily, I wanted to try to potty train her before the new baby would be born because I didn't want to be changing 2 diapers all day long. So I tried starting to potty train her right after she turned 2, but she would kick and scream and she would jump off where, she would hurt herself, right? So she would jump off the potty and she didn't want anything to do with it. I got her like a little toilet insert that had Minnie Mouse on it and I had, Tinkerbell on it. I got her 2. And she didn't like either of them. She was like, I don't care. No, I don't want to. And she just kept saying, no, no, no. And she just kicked and screamed and she would jump off the toilet and she just wouldn't do it. And then I had also gotten her a little potty chair. No, she didn't want any of it. She refused. She did not want to. She was not ready. So I had to give up and say, okay, I guess I'm changing 2 diapers. So because she didn't want to, I just waited. And at 2.5, I tried again, and this time I went the route with, oh, let me buy you underwear. Look, you got pretty little underwear, My Little Pony underwear. You're a big girl just like Sophia. Sophia wears underwear, and, Emily adores Sophia. She thinks that, she's her hero, so I had to play up Sophia. And I told her, look, Sophia's a big girl, and she wears underwear. Only babies wear diapers. You're not a baby anymore, right? And she would be like, well, no, I'm a big girl. I go, yeah, you're a big girl. You're not a baby anymore. Big girls wear underwear. So I had to really play up the big girl wear underwear. And so at 2.5, I started, getting her excited about it. And there was no pressure. I told her, once you're ready to potty, make potty, I will put on your underwear. And so until then, you're going to wear pull-ups. And so I started also sitting her dolls, like her dolls and her stuffed bears and, her stuffies on the potty chair. And I'm like, oh, look at your baby's going potty. Oh, look at your bear is going potty. And so she would get confused. At first, she was pissed off. Like she would scream and grab her dolls and toys and stuff. And she would scream no, and she would run off with them. But after a while, she saw that I was doing that. I'm like, oh, look, they're going potty. Let's wipe them. And so I did the whole let me play a game with you. And then she finally started getting interested in it. She started sitting on the potty chair with fully clothed with her, diaper and everything on. And I said, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. So I let her do that. So I let her play with her potty chair for a while until she made the decision herself that she wanted to try to potty in it. And so once she did, I was like all for it. I'm like, okay, let's do it together. You go in your potty chair, I'll go in the toilet. And so that worked. That worked for her. She was interested, and then she saw that, when Sophia would go into the bathroom, she would go in there with her potty chair. Sometimes she wouldn't even go. She would go through the motions and try. And that worked. And so we did that for a week. And within a week, she was good to train. And then so she was asking me, when can I wear my underwear? I'm like, okay, you want to start wearing your underwear now? Let's put on your pretty little underwear. And so we did that, and it worked. Like she was potty trained within the week. No more diapers, no more pull-ups, no overnights anymore. So within the week, she was good. Now, last but not least, and certainly not boring, is Grace. So Grace started showing readiness and interest in making potty when she was about 20 months old. But the only reason why I didn't start at that time is because we were selling our house and we were buying a new house. And I just thought that it was going to be too many changes and it was just going to set her up to fail. So I didn't want to start potty training her at the time that she started showing readiness. So I waited until a few days after she turned 2. And I thought it was the perfect time because we had just moved into our new house. Emily and Sophia had just started school. So I had all my time to devote to her to potty train her. But like I say, Grace is a very independent baby. She's independent, she's feisty, and she does things her way and at the time that she wants to get it done. So with that said, she didn't want my help. So I got her, the potty chair, and I kept as soon as she would wake up, I would sit her down on the insert and she would go. But during the day, she would refuse to tell me or to sit down and do it at the time that I wanted her to do it. It had to be during the time that she wanted. And so what I started finding out is that she would, I would take off I didn't have the training pants on her, the pull-ups on her. I was leaving her in an underwear, the training underwear. And what she would do is I would have the potty chair in the living room, in her family room where she plays and she watches TV and stuff. And she would just do it on her own. I would take her to the bathroom. I would tell her, come on, Gracie, it's time to go potty. And she wouldn't. She's like, no, I don't want to. She wouldn't sit down. And not 2 minutes later, she'd go to the living room or her family room to the potty, and she'd come back and be like, I pee-peed, I did it. And she would be carrying the potty full of pee, but she wouldn't pull down her pants. So she was dripping and she had the potty full of pee. And so I would have to tell her, no, Grace, not like that. You have to tell me. You have to tell me. And if you're not going to tell me, you have to pull down your pants. And so we did that for, oh my gosh, forever. She just was not getting it. And so after a week, I took everything off. I'm like, you know what? You're going to be bottomless. And so I made her go bottomless. And she was still doing the same thing. She wouldn't tell me, and she would walk up with the potty full of pee and be like, I did it. And I was just getting so frustrated that she wouldn't tell me and that she wasn't doing it right because she was still peeing through. And, I was just getting so frustrated that I told my husband, I go, you know what? I think I'm going to fail at this. Maybe she's just not ready. And it had been 2 weeks already. And then finally one day we're passing by the bathroom and she tells me, oh, no, I got to go poo. And so I grabbed her immediately, because we were passing it by, and, I had the toilet seat insert. And so I sat her down right away and she pooed. And I guess that was what she needed to get it, right? So after that, she started telling me when she needed to go and that I was going to help her. And so she got it. She would tell me when she needed to go. I would sit her down. I would help her. I would clean her up. She would pull up her underwear and it was perfect. So basically what I did was, when she wakes up, put her on the potty every 2 hours. I keep checking on her. And then before bath time, before we leave anywhere, I make sure I sit her down on the potty. And, before bedtime, I would sit her down on the potty. And so it worked. That worked for her. So after 2 weeks, she was good. But then I think it was the weather changed, and it started getting very cold. So she started having nighttime accidents. She started having bedtime accidents. And so with that, I decided, okay, every time she falls asleep, because she's cold, she's, wetting herself. So we're going to have to get pull-ups again until she learns how to hold it during this cold weather. So that's what we did. And she had learned, she was already pretty good. Like she had already gone, I would say like 5 days without peeing the bed, without wetting the bed. But it just so happened to be the week that we got the dog. We got a new dog, Lucy, and she was jealous of Lucy. She was jealous of Lucy, and she even barked and bit us, because, she pretended to be a dog. So not only that, but also she had gotten constipated. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to let her wear pull-ups anymore because she finally learned how to hold it during her sleep, during the cold weather. But that day I was going to go get my hair done, and I was afraid that, this was going to be the first time we were driving and she probably was going to fall asleep and she probably was going to wet herself in the car seat. So I thought, I'm just going to leave the pull-up on her. And I went to go get my hair done, and she, like I said, she had been constipated and she kept trying to go and she couldn't go. And so while I was there at the salon, my hairstylist was eating Flaming Hot Cheetos. She was pregnant and she had a craving for it. So she was eating Flaming Hot Cheetos, and Gracie just started sneaking, Flaming Hot Cheeto chips, and she started like sneaking them and started eating them. I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that she could eat them. I thought they would be too spicy for her, but she was able to eat them. And then because I'm sure it was because of the spicy Flaming Hot Cheetos, she looked at me and she kind of bent down, and I was like, oh no, oh no. She pooped herself, and I was like, oh no. And so she started crying. It was a big deal to her because, she hadn't done that in so long. And oh, by the way, she had been potty trained for 4 months, 4 full months. And so at that point when she had her poop accident, I told her, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You were sick, you were constipated. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You had an accident. Let's just clean you up and that's it. Well, I told her, don't worry about it. It was an accident. She heard green light. You don't ever have to potty again. And since January, she has refused to potty train. And I think it had everything to do with, the weather, the dog, and the constipation. And so I put on the pull-ups again on her. And so she, ever since then, since January, she's decided that she is not going to potty. That's too much responsibility for her, and she would rather me change her diaper. And so I spent like a whole month trying to get her back on the potty, trying to train her again, and she refused. She knew what to do. She knows how to do it. She just flat out refused. She would say no. She would start screaming and crying. She would jump off the potty. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm not going to force it. I'll just try again later, when she's ready to do it again. And now that the girls, that Emily and Sophia are out of school, I thought, you know what? This is a perfect time. They're out of school. It's 6 months later or, 5 months later, and I'm going to try again. So the girls were out of school for about a week, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start potty training her. And it started going good again. But then I had a heart attack and I spent 4 days away from her. Well, actually, I spent longer. I spent like almost a whole week away from her. And my mom wasn't keeping up with the potty training because, she was worried about me. Plus, she had all the kids there and my niece, Sarah, as well. So she wasn't able to keep up the potty training with her. So, since it's been 3 weeks since my episode, my hospital stay, I decided, you know what, it's time to get going again. Like, it's time for you to learn how to potty train again. And I'm telling you that this baby, she is so smart and she is so independent, and it has to be on her timeline, that I started taking off the pull-ups and putting on her underwear. And she started noticing when I was busy or occupied, and she would run back, take off her underwear, put on her pull-up, and just have her safety net of the pull-up. She doesn't want the responsibility, I'm telling you. So I started hiding the pull-ups from her, and I keep telling my husband, that's it. No more pull-ups, don't buy anymore, because she's going to continue to use that as a safety net. If she has no choice but to have underwear, the potty training would be easier. But I guess he's afraid of accidents, and he thinks that she needs it. And I'm like, I would rather have accidents and get her trained than to keep giving her the safety net of the pull-ups. So, in short, we are in the middle of retraining Gracie. But at the end of the day, the most important part of potty training is 2 things. Number 1, that the child is ready. And number 2, that the trainer is consistent. That's all it takes to potty train. That's it. So with that said, that is the end of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share it with a mom friend. And if you can, please do rate and review the podcast. Doing so will help the podcast get better rankings, and it will be also more visible for other people to find the podcast. So please do rate and review. I would really greatly appreciate it. Thanks, guys.